Hi, my name is Lisa Martin. I am the mother of a child with special needs. He has Fragile X syndrome. In many respects, he has been my teacher. He has made me be a more caring, compassionate, better human being. What we have learned together on our journey, I have realised the difficulties and challenges that parents of special needs children face are wide and varied. During my years of facilitating courses for parents and professionals, I have met some wonderful people who have shared with me their stories of great joy and sadness, who have experienced the good, the bad and the ugly of all aspects of life bringing up their special children. I am passionate about empowering parents who are dedicated in helping their children with additional needs. You're invited to my podcast. I will be talking about all things in our special world of disability and additional needs. I will be interviewing other parents of children with special needs, as well as professionals and people in the community who are offering services that help. Sometimes these podcasts might touch an emotional nerve and upset you. Other times they might fill you with joy and empower you. I don't mean to make you angry or upset, but we need to get a wider audience listening and talking about disability. Only when this happens, I believe disability won't be feared as it is today. My name is Lisa Martin, and this is my story. I was a late mum. I didn't get pregnant until I was 38. I was over the moon, and pregnancy was wonderful. I felt great. I went out for lunch with my good friend, who was also pregnant, and my baby was constantly on the move. I used to say it was like having Iggy Pop inside there. The name Iggy actually became my child's name, and in fact Iggy never did stop moving from the moment he was born. He's always been a busy boy, fidgeting, flapping, jumping, flicking his fingers, kicking out his legs, later running everywhere, having no sense of danger. It soon became apparent to me that Iggy was struggling with everyday things, and I didn't really understand exactly what these struggles were and what they meant, and what effect it would have not only on his life but also on mine. My concerns grew, and I started sharing my worries with friends and family. Many would say I was worrying for no reason, saying things like, "Don't worry, he'll grow out of it. He's a boy, they develop more slowly. Don't worry, he'll catch up." One of my personal favourites was, "You know Albert Einstein didn't talk until he was 4. He'll talk when he's ready. Stop worrying." All of these statements, even though they were coming from people who loved me and didn't want me to worry, made me just stop sharing my concerns. This made me very isolated and scared for my child and my future. So I started on the lonely path of getting a diagnosis for my child. I was passed from pillar to post, from professional to professional. I had actually been Googling everything I could find, and I thought Iggy pretty much had everything I read about. He couldn't have everything, could he? Well, we'll come to that later. Trying to navigate this broken system without any support was really hard. No one signposted me to the correct place. On top of this, I was grieving. I was grieving for a child that was very much alive, but the life I thought he was going to live was slowly dying in my heart. I knew he was different. I knew that my life was never going to be the same either, and I also had to grieve for that as well. Grieving is a process, and it is different for everyone. Being the parent of a special child, we can be triggered by normal things other children are achieving, while our child struggles to achieve that same thing. Sometimes they might never achieve that thing that your friend's child is achieving, and this can set the grieving cycle off again. I went private because the waiting lists for assessment were taking too long. So his first diagnosis was ADHD, and this explained him not him being really busy, really. But I also felt that there was something else going on, because where I'd been Googling everything, I was starting to become quite knowledgeable in all these different disabilities and different additional needs, really. So not long after the ADHD, we had the long-awaited autism spectrum assessment, and that came back negative. And this was confusing for me because I knew there was something going on. So we booked another assessment for 6 months' time. I'd been reading a lot about sensory processing disorder, and I was getting all of this information from America. You see, America is like 20 years ahead of the UK, with many medical research and practices. And at the time, which was 2013, every professional I was asking about sensory processing disorder, or SPD as it's known, they'd never heard of it. And I knew that this was something that Iggy was struggling with. This was affecting his behaviour big time. See, the senses are how we process the information we are getting about our environment. And if a child is not processing the information correctly, then the world for them becomes a confused and scary place. And they react by fight, flight, or freeze. And Iggy was certainly doing a lot of them. He was hitting out. He was running off a lot of the time with no sense of danger. And sometimes he would just freeze as well. He'd get this glaze over his eyes, and he'd just be immobilised. I mean, I do know what that is now. It's sensory overload. So I started reading about sensory integration therapy, sensory diets, and I researched occupational therapists. I started getting Iggy some support privately, which cost me an absolute fortune, but it was really helping with his behaviour, so it was well worth it. Eventually, on his second assessment of autism, we had a new paediatrician, and he was fresh out of med school, which was actually to our benefit, because he remembered studying about chromosome deletion and, just chromosomes in general. So after 2 years of assessments, the NHS, private, I was told that Iggy has full mutation Fragile X syndrome and that I am the carrier. So it was like when I say we were lucky that this new paediatrician had sent us for blood tests, because that's how you get the diagnosis of Fragile X, because it's genetic, it's from blood tests. And autism is not a blood test. And the reason why I say we were lucky, because Iggy hasn't got the physical signs of Fragile X, which can be a long face and prominent ears. He has got a high arched palate, but obviously you can't see that. So this news was bittersweet for me, because I felt that I wasn't being an anxious helicopter mummy, which is what everyone was saying. But at the same time, I was also devastated. I was very overwhelmed. I know I had to step up and learn all of the new ways of learning, the way my unique, beautiful child would learn. But I had to learn that first so I could teach him. So I learned things like Makaton, using visual supports, positive behaviour management strategies, which worked for a while. And then it did stop working. Some of the strategies weren't working as effectively, because part and parcel of the Fragile X syndrome is high levels of anxiety. And when he got older, there was life events that happened that made his pervasive anxiety just go through the roof, which also gave him the later assessment of pathological demand avoidance. So he did actually get the autism diagnosis, but many years later. So he's a complex little character, my child Iggy. Absolutely wonderful little boy. He's the one person that makes me laugh so much in the world. His sense of humour is amazing. He's amazing, but he can be challenging. So on top of this, getting the Fragile X syndrome diagnosis, it was bittersweet, but it brought with it many things that I had to share, which was sharing the Fragile X news to my close family and my extended family, because I had to explain the genetic side of Fragile X and how people could plan for having children and how it passes down from generation to generation. And the complications of Fragile X in later life as well can develop into something called fracture, which can be misdiagnosed as Alzheimer's or dementia, but it is actually fracture. So Iggy was also up in the night a lot of this time, which was really exhausting. I had to make really difficult decisions about his future alone and tired, while grieving as well. One of these decisions was mainstream school or special school. I decided special school was best because Iggy was still in nappies, and when I was visiting all of the mainstream schools, they just seemed really busy, really noisy, and just not right for Iggy. I mean, there was like 30 odd children in a class. Iggy would just get completely lost in there, and his sensory system would be completely overloaded constantly. So I did think special school, and this was with quite a lot of resistance from his dad, because part of the grieving process is denial, and his dad was also grieving, obviously. We'd already split up by then. We grieved quite differently, and I think the stage of denial, his dad stayed there for quite a while longer than what I did. And there's no right and no wrong. Everyone grieves differently. But yeah, his dad really struggled with the thought of his child going to a special school. The grieving process, part of that is the anger stage. And for me personally, the anger stage of the grieving really motivated me. It made me Google more, and it made me get out there, and it made me find the correct support for me and my child. The Fragile X Society were absolutely amazing. They helped me a lot. They've got a support helpline. They were a shoulder to cry on. They were just brilliant. They also have a Fragile X conference every year, which I try and get to every single year, where I meet my new Fragile X family. But something interesting for me was the social media side of connecting with people. Because on my lonely journey, I had actually lost quite a few friends along the journey. But I actually joined lots of Facebook sites. So I joined the Fragile X Society Facebook site, the ADHD site, and the Sensory Processing Disorder site. And I gained loads of friends globally throughout social media. I was actually getting more support from people I would never meet than many people that were in my life physically. After the anger stage, I went through feeling really guilty because I was the one that passed the gene on to Iggy. I felt guilty about everything. I felt guilty that I wasn't enough because I was a single parent. I felt guilty that my parenting skills were maybe not as good as what they should have been. I felt guilty that I wasn't spending enough time with my child because I was so busy trying to navigate a broken system and Googling all the time. I was constantly on the laptop. I'm sure Iggy thought that was like an extra limb of mine at one point. I just wanted to know how I could help my child. It was a very, very challenging time for me, very isolating and very overwhelming. I then went into a depression. I felt very isolated. I'd lost a lot of friends. I didn't want to be on social media anymore. I just felt very overwhelmed. I was crying at anything and everything, from EastEnders to dropping something to someone, anyone, usually a stranger, being kind to me. And when I say a stranger, that could be somebody that I'm buying a pint of milk and a loaf of bread from, that just gets chatting to me. I just start crying. Yeah, it was awful. And a lot of crying in front of my child as well, which made me feel guilty again. So this grieving process sometimes would flip from one stage back into the last stage and back into the anger stage. You know, it's not linear. It goes around in circles, and it's different for every person. So when I was in this depressive state, I also let myself go. I must have looked like I was getting dressed in the dark, because I was just putting anything that was just covering my modesty. Mixed matching clothes, hair not brushed, not wearing any makeup. And I also started talking really quickly, which seemed a bit crazy, not only because I was living on coffee, because I was exhausted all the time, but I quickly learned from visiting different professionals that we have a time slot. So I would make big long lists of all the things that I needed to ask and talk really quickly, get the answers, write everything down, because I just wanted to get as much information and much support and help and be signposted to the correct places that I could possibly get in that allocated time. So really, all of this resulted in me looking and sounding quite deranged. Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one, because I was so angry and so protective of my child. I was like a warrior woman. So if anyone looked at my child in the wrong way, I was ready to attack. But if anyone looked at me in a sympathetic way or a kind way, I would just burst out crying. Yeah. So this might be resonating with some of you parents that have gone through similar situations to myself. But we do come out the other end. We do. And I found a local charity where I got lots of support. I got support with filling out really upsetting but vital paperwork, like the disability living allowance forms and the blue badge, which helped support me getting my child around, which was quite challenging, because sometimes he had no sense of danger. And he would, if he just refused to walk, he would just lay down in the middle of a busy road, and that would be it. He's not going anywhere. When he was younger, I could manage that because I could lift him up. As he got older, I couldn't lift him up, especially if I had shopping and things like that with me. So the blue badge was absolutely vital. It really was a game changer. But you really, from my experience, I knew, even though I'm very capable of filling out forms, the reason you need someone to help you fill it out is because these forms are explaining your child in the negative, and all you want to do is talk about your child in the positive, which in reality doesn't get you the support you need. So you really need somebody there saying, but look, yeah, he has got these really positive things about him, but remember when he done this and when he does that. And you know, it's not easy. Everyday normal living experiences are amplified and are actually really challenging for you. So yeah, I got a lot of support doing that. I actually met a lot of other parents going through very similar situations to me and my child, and this is where I found my new community. This is where I started to accept this new special world that me and my child had suddenly been catapulted into. Because unless you have a child with additional needs or a disability, or you have a family member who has a child with additional needs or disability, then you will never, ever know this special world. You've got no need to. You know, unless you walk in our shoes, then you don't need to know it. And I was one of them people until I had my child, Iggy. and now we are part of this new special world, and it's actually really lovely. But at first it was a struggle because I didn't know it. It's the fear of the unknown. It's scary. Somebody gave me this poem once called Welcome to Holland, and it's really beautiful. And basically entering this new special world is just like that poem called Welcome to Holland. So at this charity-run organisation, I also done lots of parent courses, and I started putting into practice what I learned. So I learned Makaton, and I learned visual supports. I learned some positive behaviour strategies, which, like I said earlier, worked for a while until Iggy's anxiety kicked in. Basically, I know how hard this world can be. The grieving, the judgment, especially judgment from general public, and sometimes judgment from your own family. The constant having to jump through hoops to get your child's needs met, to advocate for your child, be your child's voice. I know the exhaustion, the stress, and the lack of understanding. But I also know the resilience, the tenacity, and the love we parents have for our children. Iggy has been my teacher, and he's taught me to slow down and smell the roses. He's taught me to be present. You know, there's probably a lot of gurus out there that's taken them years to meditate and be in that constant feeling of being present. I'll tell you what, just have a child with additional needs, and your child helps you be present, because you've got to be in the moment. You really have. He's taught me what unconditional love is. He's basically made me become a much better version of myself. He's taught me to listen with my eyes and observe the subtle ways that people communicate. He's taught me to be much more accepting, but at the same time to be more assertive. He's taught me that time is precious and to choose wisely, to spend my time wisely, to spend my money wisely, to basically be wise. I went on to facilitate courses for parents, which I've been doing for the last 5 years now. And these courses are to support the parent to help their child in a fun, playful way. I am passionate about empowering parents and carers who are dedicated in helping their children with additional needs. I am aiming to have these courses online because at the moment my live events are just mainly in London, and I know other parents outside of London would also benefit from these courses. I understand the isolation and the constant struggles trying to navigate this broken system, and it can eventually manifest in mental or physical pain, or sometimes both, mental and physical pain. I know from my own experience and the talking to other parents and carers that we need a safe, supportive network where we can practice self-care strategies. I have a background in yoga and breathing and other positive self-care techniques, which have kept me positive in my challenging world. So I'm currently setting up my Feel Good in a Challenging World weekly event, where I want to empower parents to be able to feel good about themselves, have confidence and self-esteem, have social skills, and building a support network not only for themselves but for their community. And the aim would be to eventually train others to also put the Feel Good course on in their own hometown. So that is my dream. I'm working hard at it, but obviously because I am a single mum and I have got quite a challenging child who's very unique in his needs, sometimes things just take a little bit longer than what I would like. And I've had to really be good to myself with this as well, because I used to be a very impatient person. But yeah, it's about acceptance again. So yeah, sometimes things do take longer than what I envisage, but I will get there. And as long as I am setting one foot in front of the other, I will get there. I have met some amazing people on my journey with my child, and they've all got their own stories. The reason why I'm calling this podcast The Good, the Bad and the Ugly is because I've met great people with great positive stories. The good. I've met lots of professionals that are working really hard to support families like myself with children with additional needs. There's some amazing charity-run organisations out there. There's many parents who have children with additional needs who, due to their own concerns, have set up organisations to help other families with children with additional needs. So this is the good. Unfortunately, there is quite a lot of bad as well. So the bad, when I say the bad stories, it's the bad stuff that, again, a lot of families like myself with children with additional needs, the constant struggles, the constant just getting through a door before it's closed on us, the stress, the living with anxiety, the chronic stress on a daily basis, the lack of support, the lack of understanding, the being judged by family and friends and Joe public that don't even know us are judging us constantly. And there's some downright ugly stuff going on as well. And there's ugly stuff that really terrifies me personally as a parent of having a child with additional needs. Because even though we are in the present a lot of the time, because we have to be, sometimes we get glimmers of the future for our children. And some of the media coverage of care homes and what's going to happen to our children with the amount of cuts that's already happening. Is there going to be more? Are people going to love our children the way that we love them? It's absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Yeah. And there is some downright ugly stuff going on. So yeah, that's why this podcast is called The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. And my aim of this is to just get people talking about everything, talking about how we feel, and that's okay because we're just human. It's okay to feel crap. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel these grieving processes. And we need to talk about it. We need to have people to talk about it with. And we don't want to feel ashamed. We don't want to feel isolated. We've got a voice and we want to use it. Because this is when we get support. But I think we also need to celebrate. We also need to celebrate the big stuff, like going to tribunals and getting our children's needs met after really long struggles and on the brink of exhaustion. We just managed to get what we need for our child to be able to feel content for a little while until it all starts again, unfortunately, because it is a constant battle. But to celebrate the small things as well, the things that other people, unless you've got a child with additional needs, wouldn't even observe. They wouldn't even see it. But this is why it's so important to have a community of like-minded people, because we're the only people who get it, and that's with each other. We can celebrate with you the small things because we're celebrating that too. It's just so important. So my aim of this podcast is hopefully to strike a chord with somebody. Some of these podcasts are going to be just stories. Some podcasts are going to be very informative. Some podcasts are going to strike a chord with you. It's all about not feeling as isolated in this special world. Let's reach out. Let's be a community. Let's get everybody under this one umbrella of this special world and support each other and information share. Yeah, So that's my story. Now we're going to move on to some other stories in this special world called The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. To find out more about what I do, visit www.specialworldtraining.com and follow us on our Facebook page, Special World Training, Instagram and LinkedIn. I believe knowledge is power and strength is in numbers. And if more people get involved in our special world, we can all make our world a better place. Join me next week for more amazing stories from the good, the bad and the ugly.